Colliders, it is so awesome to have you join us, whether you're at home watching or in one of our small groups meeting around the Marshalltown area. Today is our second lesson in our Apologetics series. Now, if you didn't see our video last week, you can watch it on our YouTube channel. And there we defined apologetics as just being a big word, big fancy word, to talk about what we believe, why we believe it, and how to share that with others. Today we're talking about atheism and evolution. Atheism and evolution often go hand in hand, although not always, and they are two of the most common opposing worldviews that you will come into contact with. It is important to know something of these other worldviews so that you can share your faith with them, but also so you can have a more rounded faith for yourself. Before we dive in, I want you to go find an object, whether on your person or around the room, wherever you're at. Pause this video now, find something that by looking at it, you know it was man-made. Okay, go. Okay, now that you found your object, I want you to take a selfie with it. Get a parent or a youth coach, if you don't have a phone that is capable of doing that yourself, to take a pic if you can't, and post to our Collide discussions page. And we'll pick our favorite and give a $10 gift card out to someone this week. So find an object, post a picture, win a prize. That easy. Anyways, before we can dive into this topic, we need to define what an atheist is and what a Christian is. For our discussion today, we're talking about both people from the perspective of their worldview, how they see the world. An atheist doesn't believe in any God or gods, and maybe doesn't even see the purpose of a God. A Christian not only believes in one God, but also, and this is very important, they submit their life to Him. In James, we see that even the demons believe in God, but they lack the submission to Him. You may want to write that down even. Submit to God. Through the Bible, Christians believe that God is personal, knowable, and intimately involved in the world. So come back, watch this again if you missed that. Personal, knowable, and intimately involved in the world. Because we believe these three things, we believe that we and anyone can know God if they seek Him. Let's look at Romans chapter 1, verse 18. Pause this right now if your group needs time to look it up for yourself. Sometimes I can be tricky and misread scripture just to see if you know your stuff. Awesome. Okay, so Romans chapter 1, verse 18, starting in verse 18. The wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of people who suppress the truth by their wickedness. Verse 19. Since what may be known about God is plain to them because God has made it plain to them. Verse 20. For since the creation of this world, God's invisible qualities, His eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. Job says somewhat of the same thing in chapter 12. Pause again, go look it up. Wow, you're really fast looking that up. Okay, Job chapter 12, verse 7. But ask the animals and they will teach you, or the birds in the sky and they will tell you, or speak to the earth and it will teach you. And let the fish of the sea inform you. Which of all these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this? In His hand is the life of every creature and the breath of all mankind. Verse 11, does not the ear test words as the tongue tastes food? Is not wisdom found among the aged? Does not long life bring understanding? To God belong wisdom and power, counsel and understanding are His. The nature, God's invisible qualities are there to be seen if you're looking. If anyone seeks, he will find me. God doesn't need me, Dave Chase, to prove His existence for Him. He is doing it already. I don't know how much experience you have with the mountains. When I go to the mountains, whether the Rockies in Colorado or Wyoming, Montana, or Washington, or the Appalachians in the East Coast or the Alps in Europe, I seem to not be able but to help myself, but to praise God. I don't know why, and I know that this is not everyone's experience, but I think even if I was trying not to, I don't think I could help but to worship God in the mountains. They are so majestic, so beautiful, and scream to me that there is a God. Now, if you're an atheist, we're so glad that you're in one of our groups or watching this online. We're glad that you are here, and it is okay if we differ on this. You would probably be quick to point out how evolution explains how the mountains were formed and that you think they are beautiful too. But that does not mean you have to worship a God, is the argument you would make to me. You find my sentiment maybe even a little funny. There's a lot of freedom in thought in atheism, granted, but I was recently talking to a friend of mine who's an atheist, and he asked him what he does with unanswered questions. And he said he gets comfortable with not knowing. I just live in the comfort of not knowing and not having answers to my questions, with having unanswered questions. Another atheist, former classmate of mine, recently told me that as the sea of his knowledge grew, so did the shoreline of his questions. I think he was quoting somebody. But I want to be honest with you. Both Christianity and atheism deal with unanswered questions. But it's how we deal with them that is so radically different. Atheists will never get the proof they say they want on paper until their death, because it's impossible for a human to be, 1, all-knowing, 2, omnipresent, which means present everywhere at all times, like God is. So we could never prove him, even if we saw him. And this brings up another point, that if we could prove him, then faith would not be a thing. Faith is what makes our relationship with God so special. Hebrews 11:1 says that faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. If we had unshakable proof, then faith would not exist. I was at a small debate between a Christian and an atheist, a pretty cool thing, and a friend of mine was wondering if the atheist search for answers and his self-proclaimed search for answers and truth would ever allow them to have faith. Like if there was ever a lesser amount of proof that would still leave room for faith in their books. In other words, what is the minimal amount of evidence that you would need and still have room for faith? To put that in an analogy, when I was young and I tried to jam a knife into an electrical outlet, my dad told me, no, don't do that. He didn't have to explain electricity to me, and he didn't have to explain how all electricity works and that so many watts would be going racing through my body. He didn't have to tell me that it would hurt. That's all he had to have to say is, hey, this is gonna hurt you, don't do this. And that was enough. I trusted him and that he knew better. I didn't have all the proof, although some of you needed the proof and you still just jabbed that in right then when he wasn't looking. And now you will always know, although maybe you still don't know about, well, maybe you don't know about how electricity works still. When I come up against questions, sometimes God answers them, and sometimes I just trust that God is bigger and wiser than me. Otherwise, he wouldn't be much of a God. Now I know with questions though, that doesn't mean that we should just rest in the unknowing of questions, that there are answers to so many questions that we have. I can't address all the questions that you have, although I'd be love to sit down, have a coffee, I'll buy, and we can talk over some of your questions that you have after this. So let's pause here for a few announcements before we get on to a couple other points. Okay, 2 more points I would like to share since this is a Christian study. A big problem I see with atheism is when it tries to break down our purpose or the meaning of life. When it tries to explain morality, the difference between right and wrong, but they don't have much of a leg to stand on, it doesn't supply real or even good answers for these. Now, I love that Christianity has given me a direction to go and live a life making better choices and living with fewer regrets. I love the meaning it gives me. And second is this idea that Christianity and science can't coexist. I want to go on record and say they're not at odds at all. There are a lot of strong Christian scientists and many, but not many maybe, but some that have become Christians after studying science. As we learned last week, the Bible talked about scientific things before they were accepted as fact. Today, it seems like there's just a big outcry against being Christian and against being a scientist. However, I'm not a Christian today because I think that evolution is false. I mean, I do believe that it's false, and I do believe in creation and that God created the world. But that is not the main reason I'm a Christian. I know Christians who also believe in evolution. If you came to me with new evidence making evolution a fact rather than a theory, it would not shake my faith. I would be okay with that. No, because the reason I'm a Christian has nothing to do with the origin of life, but rather 2,000 years ago, Jesus died on the cross. That's proven. And his brother and 11 other guys totally changed the trajectory of all mankind when they died. And James saying, my brother, or this Jesus that you killed, was the Son of God. And that is why I'm a Christian. Now, this was just an intro to your small group. Leaders have a lot more questions for you, and especially they have 3 lists of scriptures that dive into the science and the Bible and how they jive and connect with each other. And so if you have a lot more questions on that, please dive into that, and that's going to be great. You guys are going to have a great small group after this. Thank you very much. See you next week.